With our focus and discussions around gender-based violence as promised, as of course we do commemorate Women's Month in August. Joining us now via Zoom is Professor Tanya Robinson, who is a child psychologist and founder and director of the Green Duck International Institute, a child-centered forensic investigations, dispute resolution and training. Prof Robinson, always a pleasure to see you. Thank you very much for joining us here on SABC News.
Thank you so much. Good day.
Now, as a start, we're talking about gender-based violence, but we can't talk about women without talking about children and child abuse, or the impact, rather, of GBV on children. How does gender-based violence really play a role, a harmful role, really, on the plight of children?
I think it's such a complex issue. The reality is that, I think, as you rightfully say, there's very much a joint and intergenerational sort of complexity around sort of children and women, and women living in fear, and that transfers onto the children, creates further anxiety for children, and also children mimic behavior that they see. So often when a woman live in fear, children will live in fear. So it is difficult to separate the two issues between violence against children and violence against women, because it is such a similar complexity that we need to address jointly. It is very disconcerting, obviously, in COVID times, what has occurred, and how domestic violence in homes are on the increase. And I read an article earlier today that speaks about the shadow pandemic, and it is really concerning how that is growing, that domestic violence and victimization of women and children are definitely on the increase because of the anxiety, stress, money worries. A lot of factors are contributing to an increase in violence against women and children that really needs to be addressed.
Now, how do children then react or respond to fear? I mean, you mentioned the fact that if your mother is living in fear, of course, then that will mean that you'll also be living in fear. But how do then children then respond or react, and then what does it then cause later on as they go into adulthood?
Mostly, and I think we see so many children, and I wrote a book called The Silenced Child, and children are silenced by victimization of others and of adults, and it creates regression for children, severe regression, so they don't reach their developmental milestones. That is obviously a concerning factor with regards to educational development, emotional growth, the development of psychopathology, anxieties, the stress factors, and all of that influence sort of normal development of children, healthy development of children. And that is obviously what we aim in society, is to develop children that is well-rounded adults. The unfortunate reality is the more children witness domestic violence and the more their anxiety levels grow, the more or there's a higher chance that they are going to become dysfunctional and unhealthy adults. So very much an important, we cannot emphasize it enough, is how we need to focus on the health and the general well-being of our children in society, not just in Africa, but I think worldwide. We see that children's mental health is it's problematic. More suicides, more dysfunctional behavior, more crime-related injury. So very much an important aspect and dialogue that we have to have, I think, in the open, is how are we going to create a functional environment for our children to develop them into more functional adults, because they are, at the end of the day, the future of society.
Now, what are you finding to be the reasons that there's this, what I'm seeing or seems to be an increase in cases of gender-based violence? I'll say, I've been an anchor woman for many years, but for some reason, the last couple of months and maybe years, there seems to be more that I'm having to report on or read on about gender-based violence. Do you see it as an increase, or are your studies kind of pointing to maybe that it's just more of these cases being reported on? And I suppose, we now have social media, we now have Twitter, you can easily get information, we can easily record incidents now. Is it that, or is it really that there is an increase? What exactly do you find?
I think there is an increase in aggression. People are angry. I think I see it in my career is, we're confronted with many angry people. And yes, people report, but we still see that the reporting of violent crimes are still very low. So even with all of the media and social media and platforms available to women and children, we still do not have enough reporting of violent crimes. I think the media cover it better these days and highlights it more. That is obviously phenomenal to bring it up in the open, but it remains disconcerting that people are not speaking up against what is happening to them, because there is definitely an increase in aggression, in anger, that is unfortunately taken on or upon sort of vulnerable victims. And we do know that children and females remain a vulnerable population group. I can add on to say that I do think if anyone has experienced violent crimes that has been committed against themselves, and they do realize how difficult it is to leave those circumstances, especially if you do have children. For many females, it is exceptionally difficult to leave their homes under conditions of pressure, manipulation, violent acts committed against them, and perhaps threats of filicide, of being hurt and abused. So under those conditions, it is very difficult to leave an abusive situation. So I think it is, it remains a difficult subject matter to deal with because of the fear that goes with violent crimes against women or children and how to get out of those circumstances. So even with the media focusing on it, I think we do have an exceptionally long way still to go to fully address the issue on crime against children and women.
Yeah. Prof, one of the common factors raised by, some of the guests we've had before you is the worrying way in which perhaps young boys are brought up, how they are socialized, and perhaps that gender-based violence is a direct result of how boys are socialized in society. Would you agree with that? And is that your analysis? The fact that boys are always seen to be, above girls, better at this, better at that. Do you find in your analysis that indeed this may be a contributing factor to the issue of gender-based violence in society?
I think we've come a long way. We are trying. I think we are definitely trying to create a society where there's more equal rights and gender equality. But we are far from a point where women, I do believe, are as empowered as men. And that is definitely from the starting point of development where I do believe that there is still a patriarchal society, if we want to recognize it or we don't want to recognize it. In my reality, that is how it is. And that has an effect of violence against women and children. So it is important to show boys that women are equal and that we do have the same rights as what they do. And for our young children, for girls to empower them and for young boys to know how to treat young girls, because still in this 21st century that we live in, we still see the dynamics that is very similar to, I think, when I grew up as a child. So I cannot state enough how important it is for us as a society and for adults to treat young girls equally as what we do boys, and to address aggression from a very young age. There is no place for aggression towards a girl or a boy, for that matter. And that is our job, to teach children and our fellow adults that we are all equal, and we have to stand up for our rights, definitely.
All right, Prof Robinson, thank you so much for giving us your time this afternoon. We do understand you are joining us from Australia, but of course, renowned South African child psychologist and founder of director of the Green Duck International Institute, Professor Tanya Robinson. Many thanks to you.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Same to you.